Hello and welcome. My name is Scarlen Martinez. I'm the Senior Director of Empowerment at RISE. RISE is a national nonprofit that uses sports as a vehicle to discuss issues of race and equity with athletes, communities, owners, and sponsors. Today we're joined by the AUDL to discuss the important topic of code switching. I want to introduce my panel, or actually have them introduce themselves.
My name is John Jones. I'm a player for the Chicago Union.
I'm Christina Chung. I am the president and managing partner of the Philadelphia Phoenix, the chief medical officer of the American Ultimate Disc League, and a co-chair of the AUDL Inclusion Initiative.
I'm Joe Smash Anderson. I'm the captain of the Colorado Summit and community outreach director for Community Summit.
And I'm Kevin Pettit-Scantling, captain and player of the Madison Radicals.
Thank you guys for joining us today. Today's topic is code switching. Code switching was actually a term coined in 1954 by Eleanor Haugen, and in that era, it was used to describe multilingual people's ability to switch between different languages. However, in our current context and over the years, it has evolved to mean any time that a person feels the need to switch their language, their appearance, any part of their identity in order to fit into a dominant culture, specifically minority communities that feel the need to fit in dominant culture in order to survive and thrive, protect their social, emotional wellness, and also protect their financial status. So today we're going to unpack that, and I want to ask the panel, what does code switching mean to you?
So as far as code switching is concerned, I would say what it means to me is a difference of meeting people as your authentic self versus meeting them in a business setting. And what I mean by that is the way that you would initially just shake someone's hand when you're meeting them. I know for me specifically, having a number of different jobs in a majority white space, introducing myself to them as John, have to make sure that my handshake is perfect, where meeting someone that looks similar to me, there's a sense of dapping each other up, and I think that that is a big difference between the two.
Yeah, I think code switching is the difference between my comfort versus somebody else's comfort, and how authentic do I want to be when it comes to my comfort versus somebody else's comfort. Yeah, that's what it means to me.
Yeah. Christina, do you want to?
No, good. Keep asking.
So for me, being a part of like a white group who is mostly making up the community that we're in, it's about understanding that the person I'm talking to that might not look like me is perhaps not acting like their authentic self, and trying to create spaces that make them feel more comfortable to do so. And so just always being aware of like the pressure that I'm putting on, whether inadvertently or sometimes just implicitly.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of an amalgam of everything the panel has said as well. You know, for me, I feel like I do it all the time, and I agree. Sometimes sometimes I think of it as, what am I projecting? Is it really me, or is it a part of me? And I think that for me, code switching, maybe it's just so ingrained in how I've grown up that there's a little part of me in all the different codes, and it's just which part is coming out, right? It probably is an amalgam, but I think it's something that I thought a lot about. I think as I've progressed through my career and kind of pivoted, my interests in life. But it's funny, it's like what part of me and what part of my experience am I drawing on to relate to the person that I'm talking to? But ultimately I do think that I think that the topic to me is so important, because I feel like there's always that dominant one, and like there's always that sense when I am switching between my different identities that I know which one is going to be advantageous or disadvantageous. And I am always cognizant of the fact that I am coming from kind of the disadvantaged point.
Wow, that's powerful. I think about what you guys shared, and you're kind of hinting at this duality in identity, right? There's the true yourself, and then there's a self or the selves that you must present depending on what advantage it might give you, or understanding the notion of like, I can't show up as me fully because I won't win like that. I need to switch to this version because that version is going to win this space. I think about W.E.B. Du Bois' book, The Soul of Black Folk. And he touched on that duality, the black identity and then the American identity, and how those two don't necessarily mean the same. They actually don't mean the same thing, and you won't be successful as a black person in the American construct if you don't learn how to conform and adopt those mainstream kind of American identities or ways of life. I want to ask you guys, have you guys had a personal experience with code switching that, in your younger days, you were like, I had to do this for my survival to get ahead, that you regret now? Or are you still in the space now that you feel you still need to code switch in order to survive and thrive and move ahead in your personal or professional lives?
I think for me, the experience that stands out is the way that I view code switching is that it's more of a marketable skill. And it's in your best interest to do that, right? Again, I'm from New York City, so it's just like these things lead to money, right? Everything from, my name, coming off in English instead of my name being Jose Juan, use Joseph Anderson. From situations, an experience that stands out to me is the first time I ever went to a bar and I heard Don't Stop Believing. And everybody in the whole bar screamed, and there's not one time in my entire life that I'd ever heard that song.
I mean, Journey hits.
Did not know. I did not know at all. And so people are looking at me weird because I'm the only one who not only is not singing, but not even fitting in with the vibe at all, right? And it stood out. And I felt a sense of insecurity, not because I had to, not because I felt unsafe, but because it was so foreign, and that those situations could be difficult. But now I know it, and now when I'm in there, that's when the code switching happens, because now that I know this song, because I'm just like, oh, I know this is what we do now. This is the time. This is the time to do that, right? Because this is what everybody does, and so that's the first thing that came to my head, because there were so many experiences like that where I was just like, I have to remind people, I'm like, I'm not from here, that kind of a thing. I was just like, this is not common. My grandfather did not say that to me. Right. My mom does not cook that. And it happens a lot, particularly in the Frisbee community, as being a Latino and a person of color. I think it's a marketable skill, and I don't regret anything that I've done, particularly in my Frisbee career. But there's certainly a lot of moments where I can reflect and say, that wasn't regular for me.
Right.
Yeah, I would say similar to what Joe was saying, that I did have a lot of moments like that. I don't have one specifically that comes to mind, but I do know that playing Ultimate in Indiana is kind of not a lot of black Ultimate players. So code switching to me was a way to make sure that I could make the team and continue to do something that I'm passionate about in playing Ultimate. So it could be the difference of being on the good side of the captain so that I wouldn't get cut versus just being a practice player.
I'm a lot older than all of you guys on the panel, so I think I have probably
I can't tell, Christina.
a different perspective. I think about growing up, like I talked about before, Scarlen, in 1970s America with, amongst Korean men who viewed girls as being one way and a white community that viewed Koreans as being a certain way back then. And we'll have you know that all this conversation was not accepted back when I was a child. It's funny, I spent so much of my life being that, the token Asian person, right? We would be the token people at, I don't know, at the country club or at the restaurant, or even now. I mean, honestly, we were at Lake Geneva, and my husband, who's white, and I, we didn't talk about it, but we were talking about it with Matt earlier, that you look around, and even when I go home to Pittsburgh, with or my husband's home, they're very white communities, and you just live with people staring at you, right? And it's happening here in Madison all the time, I feel like, and in Wisconsin. And there's a part of me that is very resentful and bitter that growing up, I had to be as little Korean as possible. Right, that I had to make sure that I didn't bring my cultural food to school, right? That I had to be prim and proper, right? If I was at the country club or wherever it might be, that you're the person that's representing your race or your gender somewhere. And you know, I don't harbor like this hatred of anybody, you know. Right. I just think about how society has changed so much and how, you know, it's great to see progress because, you know, I've been told as a woman, don't talk about your kids at work. Like literally I was told that by mentors. Like if you have to go pick them up at 4 o'clock, say you have something else to do, don't have pictures of your kids on your desk. Like these are the kind of things that like, I guess I don't regret having to do it. I guess the flip side of it is I'm really happy to see progress. But I think what's really important is to remember how I felt having to do that for so long. And I think it's really important for people like myself, and that might be what drives me, to try and make sure that's not how other people are feeling, that progress continues. I think that's the way I see it.
I think for me, it's a little bit of a different shade, and it's been used for me in a lot of ways to accelerate through my professional career. I think the me that you're seeing right now, that you all are seeing right now, is something that's like somewhat performative. I want to make sure that like I'm presented well, but out there I like slouch a lot. My outfit last night is very different than my outfit right now.
Look great.
And so, thank you. This is my favorite shirt. I like this
What
shirt.
was your outfit last night?
I don't think he was wearing a shirt.
I had like this tank top and these khaki capris and these huge rocket shoes. My hair was down. But I mean, little things like that I've been doing my whole life. I also like grew up in a school who's like majority black community, and so it was different. Like I wanted to be friends with a lot of people, and I found myself, and this is in hindsight, finding that I was talking to my class peers different than I was talking to my family. And like when you're that young, you don't really understand what's happening. You just kind of like do it. And so that's kind of been like my experience, and it's changed as I get older and as I get into like the professional environment, and it's more just like putting on a tie correctly, and yeah, just trying to present myself better.
Yeah, I love that. And I really want to highlight that all of you shared a perspective of kind of doing it for a cause, to fit in, to be accepted, right? Knowing that you were doing different things, but kind of feeling like I have to if I want to like survive here. And I think when we talk about code switching and get into like, is it a skill or is it a detrimental practice? We have to kind of dig deeper, because some people, or a lot of people actually, in a lot of minoritized communities, aren't choosing to code switch because they want more friends, because they don't want to be the one person that doesn't know the biggest Journey song hit ever in the bar.
Or biggest song of all
right,
time.
Right. Or biggest song of all time. I mean, I don't know how you don't know that, but I digress. But kind of touching on what you shared earlier, which was sometimes I feel like, so I don't ride the bench and get more play time. I might have to like be more of a like, bro, or like whatever the identity is. And when we start getting to that point where you're code switching, not just to, everybody wants to fit in, everyone wants friends, everybody wants, not to be the lone ranger at a bar, but when it becomes a matter of do or die, right, of eating and not eating, of providing or not providing for your family, of advancing and getting an opportunity, or being denied an opportunity, is it fair that we still live in a world where we might need to do that in order to protect our like basic needs and basic rights as a human being? You have the right to show up at a workplace and be accepted. You have the right to fully represent yourself, in your personal life or in your professional life. You have the right to be seen and counted for as you are. And when that right seems to like not be the same for everyone, or everyone doesn't have a choice on whether I can show up at Scarlen today, have an accent, eat my plátanos, and heat it up at the conference room, and no one's gonna say a comment like, oh, what's that, or whatever. Like, I can choose to do that and be okay, but I think the problem is when it's not okay, when we still feel that pressure, or we know the reality. Like, if I show up and use my slang or speak with this accent, I'm the person in front of me, the hiring manager, who 9 times out of 10, especially in corporate America, and I think in the sports industries too, is a white person, a lot of times a white male, and if they don't see me and relate to me, you know, I won't get that opportunity. So in those instances, do you think code switching is a necessary skill, or is it a detrimental practice? Like, is it gonna erode the community identity? Is it gonna erode people's individuality and eventually, you know, I guess be the end of diversity, right? You know, so what do you guys think? Skill, necessary skill, detrimental practice. No right or wrong answer.
I still think it's a marketable skill, and the experience that I point to is when I moved from New York to Colorado, and how different it was, because it's already hard enough. I had already experienced in my career, you know, talking Ebonics and people not understanding me, you know, like the journey story that I had before, me not identifying with any food from that I've never had before. When I moved to Colorado, I was particularly loud, right? And there was just not something that they had ever experienced and had come from a place where, I say this loosely, but like, you know, I was a captain, I was up power in New York, and so to come to Colorado and come to the bottom, I had never experienced that before. And you just can't tell me nothing, you know, like it's something that I get very passionate about these things. And so again, like I had to calm myself down, and I felt like that was a sacrifice. And I don't regret that, but I had to sacrifice a little of what I had to do to gain that respect. And then when I gained that respect of those captains who, and I was very thankful, I'm not gonna name them, but those captains one of them did, particularly created a safe space for me to at least talk to him so that I could feel comfortable talking from where I'm from. And that's what allowed me to feel more comfortable being myself, right? But I didn't have the privilege of going in there on the first day and feeling like that, because I tried it and I didn't get the reaction that I normally thought. And so I think that it's a good experience to know that, you know, just in general, somebody who's like studied community spaces, you should never invade somebody else's place and think that you can just do that without something. And I think that was something that I should have thought about more. But that does play against your true authenticity, right? How can you be yourself in somebody else's place where they don't know you either? And I think that it was really important for me to learn that lesson in Colorado, for sure.
You know, I do want to say one thing though, something that you just said that kind of like, I don't know what the right word is, but you know, thinking about invading someone else's space, right? And it just dawned on me, like, I've never felt in America that's ever been my space. I'm always thinking about someone, there's always this, you know, kind of backdrop somebody, you know, nameless person, nameless culture that I'm trying to fit into regardless. So I think it's so funny that you know, as a minority are saying like, I should have thought about, you know, how to show up in someone else's space.
Absolutely, no, it's because I'm from New York. Like, no, I'm here. You know, when I come here, I'm here. Like, you should have knew.
Right.
Like, we're playing Frisbee, like you should know, right? And that's not how it's supposed to go, right? Like, you know, like I think that there's a sense of respect that everybody could have for the space, right? Like, you know, like we could respect the team, the space, you know, and I think that it's okay to be authentic, but it's not okay to come in with that kind of attitude where, you know, you're coming in and you're like, I'm him, when nobody knows you, you know, kind of a thing, right? And so I think that there's a duality that comes from that because, you know, certainly, you know, I was very privileged to play with a lot of good players, and so my confidence was very high, but there needs to be a back and forth that channels that respect, so that you can feel comfortable being yourself, because ultimately when people respect you, you will feel safer to be yourself.
So Joe, I think you said a few very interesting things, and I think one of the things you just said was confidence, right? And I think your question, Scarlen, was, is code switching a marketable skill, or is it a detrimental practice? And I think the reality of the world is it's never going to be a perfect place, right? And the reality is we want diversity because it's what makes life great, right? Like, who wants everybody to be the same? It's kind of boring, right? I don't know, you guys might think being homogenous is great, but I think it's kind of really, really dull. So I think the bottom line is people are always going to be different, right? And I think that I totally agree with you. I think it's a marketable skill, and I think it's a marketable skill for people who are confident and kind of have made it, right? But I think it's really important to understand for people on the flip side of the coin, because you can have experiences in both places, right? Like people will look at me and be like, oh, you're so like, you're successful, you're this, and yeah, I probably might, like the people make fun of me that like your confidence is like kind of crazy, like you should split it in like quarters for people, But at the same time, right? I think if it is, I feel like it's a balance. It is definitely a marketable skill, but there are definitely subsets of the community, and there are portions of me that experience it where it is extremely detrimental, because to constantly have to think about it is exhausting, right?
Yep.
And a good example that I have is, last year at the owners meeting, and this is where the entire topic of code switching in the AII kind of came up, was because I was at the owners meeting last year. I'm one of the only female representatives in a room full of pretty much white men, right? I was the only executive, and I was presenting on health and safety, on COVID, all this stuff, and I was presenting on like an entire topic that like no one had ever thought about in Ultimate before, right? And we had done a lot of, we'd done surveys. And I had to like get all this data and somehow digest it, synthesize it, and present it to a group of people who probably, one, didn't care to like hear about it, two, didn't understand what I was talking about, and three, thought everything that I was doing last year was a giant pain in the ass, right? And so I had to do all of that as the only woman, right? And so, and the whole time I'm thinking to myself, like somehow I have to do all this stuff, and I have to garner respect from this entire room because they are in the power position because they're all white men, and I'm literally the only female doing this, and somehow I have to project myself so that they like respect what I have to say, right? And I have to say, by the time I was done my talk, I was like exhausted. Like I was literally just, and I, like I said, I've got confidence to like, that could move mountains, but I was literally emotionally and mentally drained, right? And they were like, oh yeah, and then all the divisions, you guys can go and have breakout sessions and talk about this. And I looked at my husband and like the Phoenix group, and I was like, I'm going to the gym, right? And I didn't go to it, right? And I had to do the AII talk the next day, and I thought about it at the gym, like, why am I so tired? I'm like just exhausted, right? And I thought about it, I was like, I'm exhausted because I've been like gearing up for this stupid presentation for the past 4 days, right? And it's like this big, right? Yeah. And so I was like, when I give the AII presentation, like I was talking about what AI did all year and like kind of, what we're doing, I was like, I'm gonna end with this. I was like, because I feel like this room of people need to understand at the end of this, right, how this is for Matt and myself and all the people on this committee, right, working on these initiatives, and I think it's the best way for it to hit home is for me to explain how I feel right now, right? And I think about that a lot, and I think about if you extrapolate that to people who are not as fortunate as like maybe the five of us, right? Because if that little thing could make me so exhausted, I can't imagine being like a single mom, a single brown or black mother, right? Having to do all these things literally to put food on the table for your kids. And I think the problem becomes, it's true, it's like when you have to worry about not just the food, but all of that stuff too. I mean, it causes trauma, it causes anxiety, it causes, and so systemically and process-wise, I think it's super important. I think that for us, it's experiencing it as a woman or a person of color. But I think what's more important and the most frustrating part is that I think it's for the people in the power positions to understand that it exists and how the people who are not in the power positions, I think it's so important for them to try and even give one iota of understanding of what it means for people like us, right? Whether we are Joe or John or me, like what it means for us to constantly be having this tug of war, whether it's a small tug of war or it's a giant one that pretty much dictates survival.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
No, sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna highlight that. I think anytime, a person in a power position can at least acknowledge and, kind of get education on what are the struggles and what are the things that, the people that work for me or that work with me kind of have to deal with just from getting out of bed, right? The things that you as like us as a woman or a minority have to think about before even, having that first bowl of Cheerios and being ready to get to work, it's exhausting. Like, we can't ever just wake up and go and exist. There is no just, oh, you're good as you are, go, you're good, So taking that into perspective and into account, and then starting to be solution oriented. What are the things that we can put in place to, unburden you, to take that load off, to make you feel like you can show up as you are and you're gonna be great and we're gonna, respect you. You don't have to jump through all these hoops to be seen and heard and valued. So I think that's a very important part. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was great. I really liked your piece on power. I think that it is such a marketable skill. And it's like in an environment where it's super hot, you can't just go outside and be like, I'm going to dress like it's cold and be comfortable. Like, you have to learn to navigate the environment, and in that case, you have to. And I think like it is a useful and marketable skill until it becomes a barrier to gain access to the power to a majority group, right? And so like,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think that for my end, the barrier was kind of lifted moving teams. Honestly, in the AUDL, with the Chicago Union, they have a lot of pillars in place to make everything a community, and I think that was huge for me specifically, coming from another team where there was no diversity. Like, I was the diversity, and then moving to a different team that is very diverse and has just a great team culture. The first day of practice, being able to show up authentically and not have someone ask like if I needed anything or anything like that. Like, there were other people that were coming up to me, making sure that like everything that we were doing was a safe environment. Like, if I had any questions, like who to reach out to, and I think that's been great. And I think that with the question at hand of code switching being marketable, I definitely think that it is marketable, and it honestly helps to, in a way, protect yourself from being hurt, honestly. And I think that once you are able to be your authentic self around everyone around you, it does feel great to have people that have your back no matter what. So.
Yeah, and I think I hear what all of you guys are saying, and I do lean on the world's not perfect. There's a lot of diversity, and we'll all find each other or ourselves in different spaces where we want to fit in, we want to be, kind of respected and accepted. So there are times where we're going to have to tweak or figure out how to be just more approachable according to the norms set forth in that place before we got there. I think, though, there is work to be done around some of the, dominating cultural perspectives around what professionalism is, right? Because a lot of these notions that we have that have been around for forever are really excluding diverse peoples, right? If we're saying that professionalism is a buzz cut, no dreads, women with straight hair, no braids, who does that hurt, right? And if I'm telling you, you can't show up with your dreads, how does that make you feel? And then how do you show up in this space? Are you the best version of you that's gonna help that team out, or, the office or whatever? So what can we do as a society to ensure that we are creating inclusive cultures, that we are not subscribing to these ideas that actually hurt diversity and exclude people from feeling part of the team or part of the community, either in the sport or in general? What do you think we can still do as a society to kind of build more inclusion and accept people for, who they are and what they are?
I think one of the things that was important to my team, from an executive level, from a captain's level, was that we needed to place institutional frames to be different, right? And so the AUDL has ambassadors, which they do different marketable things for the AUDL, but on our team, you had to, I don't want to say take classes, but there were multiple meetings that I had with my two ambassadors in which we spoke about diversity, equity, and inclusion, where we spoke about the politics in the meetings, right? The people who make the fields, the people who choose the team. I come from a place where there's not many black people. We spoke about all those black people and why they felt uncomfortable at any point, or what were their stories, and I shared those stories with them because I think that, as one of the oldest members on the teams, I felt like it's a responsibility to give young people particularly a chance to help themselves, right? They don't want the script, they want the power, right? And so I wanted to give those ambassadors the power to be able to say, hey, you can talk to your community. Hey, you can have those individual conversations every time. Hey, the season and the communication doesn't stop at the end of the season, right? You know, you don't have to be friends with people in order to help people be safe or help people feel safe, right? And so I think that one of the things that we did is, you know, and it's kind of unpopular, but we had to make it a point to say that we were going to create safe space for particularly white men to be able to grow into a space, right? And it's as a person of color, I do not owe that to anybody, right? But I wanted to give them the power to be able to say, hey, look, let's learn a little bit, right? You know, so sometimes we have to say some spicy things, you know, we have to uncover some things, but I want them to give them the space to be able to know that they can have those conversations and feel comfortable having that, particularly because, you know, you might be in a space where you don't have any black people in that room. How do you navigate a conversation like that? Or how do you navigate it when there's two and they have different, you know, not every black person is the same. You know, we may have different feelings about it, right? And so we had to talk about all that. And so, you know, one of the things I'm very proud about is being able to help young people do that. I just think that they have a better frame on that so that, you know, people who are a little bit older like me can help older folk who are just in a different conversation than, you know, people who are 22, 23.
I love that perspective because as a captain, I'm always trying to create those safe spaces. But I think it's interesting that you start the conversation about the safe spaces telling white people that you're probably going to get it wrong. This is a place to grow.
And that's okay.
Right.
You know,
because we have to get over that. We want to like come out the gate and be like, nailed it. And that's not going to happen. So I really love that.
Remember, like, I think that there's so many people who, like, I think I got this from a radio pundit where it was just like, you know, you don't want to be right, you want to get it right, you know, kind of a thing. And so, like, there just has to be, like, a space where it's just like, hey, like, just try, right? And, you know, and it's awkward, right? Because, you know, I've definitely fielded terribly awkward conversations. I've definitely had situations where I was like, listen, like, you can never say that again. Like, you know, and it's true, you know, like, it's very, you know, like, and that's why, you know.
But they needed a space to be able to say it.
They needed to do that. I mean, that's why they brought me on board because, you know, like, you know, I came in there and I'm just like, you know, I don't want to hear that again, you know, like kind of thing, right? But I'm still your friend, you know, like kind of thing. And again, there needs to be that safety. I think that there are a lot of people, and you know, I'm very blessed to have a lot of friends, and a lot of them aren't people of color. And I think that there are a lot of people who want to be allies, and I want to help them have the tools to be better allies, you know, kind of a thing, right? But that takes effort that not every person of color has the energy to do, right? And again, as I said before, you know, it's certainly, we don't owe that to anybody, right? And so, but I think that my gift to the team as one of the veterans is to help kind of facilitate some of those things so that there can be institutional structure for the future.
For Radicals, we noticed last year that there was not a lot of mixing of like the smaller groups, subgroups on the team. Like we have a college team, and like they play their college season, and then they kind of end, and then they come into Radicals practices. But it's always like 2 months after we've always been together, and so we noticed that they kind of stay together. We noticed that like the older players like play trivia on Thursdays, like they hang out with each other. There's not a lot of like mixing of the groups. So this year we came in and we decided to like create crews that you coordinate your workouts with, your like travel schedule, your like whatever it is. And we just tried to like place people in smaller groups, and like it feels very like forced at first. But we also know that like with smaller groups, it's easier for you to present yourself. And then when you've got kind of like this group who knows you, when you step into other groups, the plan was that you would feel like safer about yourself. And we're hoping that that was like kind of the case. I definitely felt a change, but kind of to like progress that conversation, we're having like an end of year review to see how all that worked, and to hopefully continue to do stuff like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think the big thing is just seeing effort as a way to kind of grow everything, because I know that for a lot of spaces, it's kind of, there will be information that will be presented, and the information will go in one ear and out the other, but to actually see someone take action on what they've heard to try to make the space better for everybody is, I think, the biggest part that we can do to kind of make improvements. Like, it's not going to be something that changes overnight, but if there is effort, like consistent effort that's shown throughout the course of being teammates with someone, after being teammates with them, like after the season, like even in the workplace, like there could be like one board meeting and then it never gets talked about again for like an entire year. But throughout the entire year, the next time it comes up, to see people actively like trying to make changes in their lives to make everything more inclusive for others, I think that's big.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think one kind of theme I heard across all your shares is creating spaces for everyone to be able to participate as they are, right? Also creating this culture of error, right? It's okay, you don't have to have the answers. No one's gonna get it right out the gate, you know what I mean? But we need to be okay with that. We need to say that that's okay. We need to say that we're not here to say, you know, you're wrong out the gate. We want to hear what your perspective is, right? Because if we don't know what you're thinking, we don't know where the tweaks need to go, we don't know where the differences are, we don't know the work that needs to be done. And I think that's admirable, and I think it's definitely like something we need to model as a nation. I was talking to some of you guys earlier about how in this country there's just a big cancel culture. People can't speak. And if people can't speak, then they can't learn. And if we can't learn, we can't grow. And if no one's growing, we're all gonna be stuck in our different color teams, mad, and not moving forward, not moving the needle in any of these issues that are so important and that affect all the communities, right, in different ways. As a minority or a minoritized group, you know, not being able to be yourself is detrimental to your mental health, is detrimental to what you can bring to the table. You know, as a non-minoritized group, you not learning from different people, not learning from different cultures, you're also not expanding your mind and being, you know, the best person that you can be, and, you know, kind of take away from different cultures, different things that might make you grow. So we all lose when we can't all show up as our, you know, most authentic selves. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think all the awesome initiatives that you guys are doing within your individual teams and the AUDL are definitely like a fresh breath of air, and, you know, gives hope for the future. You know, that there's things that we can all do in our day-to-day, in our small groups that promote change. So I want to end with one final question to you all, and this is a question I like to ask everyone. How will you continue to rise and support these issues, be vocal about social justice, and continue promoting conversations around race, equity, and inclusion?
Well, I think that with being an athlete, there is a social media platform that's presented to us that allows us to share more information out to others and to be more outspoken and have conversations. I think that to continue with being more outspoken and everything, I think that it's just engaging in conversation with people that I might not get a chance to have a conversation with otherwise. And I think that's part of the beauty of social media at times, is that you will hear a lot of different perspectives that you would otherwise not be introduced to. It could be something as simple as someone that lives another state away, or even another country where that situation might not ever come across their point of view. So I think that getting as many different perspectives as possible and just sharing different viewpoints and having like a conversation where you're willing to listen versus just attacking someone else's point of view is how I would hope to rise and continue to be outspoken on different issues.
Yeah, I think that being anti-cancel culture is a really good way of of continuing to drive the conversation. I think that, how am I going to be committed to doing this? I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing for the past 47 years. I think I'm going to take all of the tools and qualities that I was either gifted to have or have earned over the past half century practically, and I'm going to continue to be wicked smart about it, right? And know when the time is to talk. Learn, I think, John, about different perspectives, because I think that and learn about different cultures and peoples, because I think that, one, you have to find allies, right? And I don't care if that ally is, I don't care where they come from, and honestly, the best ally you can have is an ally in power, right? And so it's not a bad thing. Like I think in the AUDL, one of the beautiful things is that there are allies that are old white men, right? And I think that I'm going to continue to foster those ties. I'm going to continue to learn about people from all walks of life. I've done that my entire career. I think that I'm going to continue to be intentionally outspoken about things and be intentionally quiet about things when I know that it's not going to help move the dial. Right? I think that as I continue to progress in my career, I'm going to continue to use platforms like this to forward and continue to live a mission-oriented life that really focuses on, I think, helping move the dial for minorities and women. And I think social media and I hated it. I really hated it. And I never had one until I had to do this crazy supergroup campaign. But I realized it is actually a very effective tool. And one of the things that I actually have thought about a lot that I'm going to be committed to is, my daughter's 12, right? And I see a lot of girls her age growing up in a very different environment than I did. And they want to do a lot of things, right? But on the flip side of the coin, I still see what their barriers are, right? So I'm going to think long and hard about how to use platforms that speak to a newer generation of kids, right? To help mentor them, honestly, into doing great things.
I think for me, there's like a kind of two-way lane. As a player, I want to continue to tell my story, right? And tell the stories of those who look like me, and continue to tell the stories of the triumphs and the pains of how long, I was lucky to play 21 years, and the people who came before me, even. And I want to continue to tell that story as a player, because I think that those stories are powerful, and I think that's part of what makes Ultimate great. From a leadership standpoint, I want to continue my leadership growth. I think institutional psychology is very important, and how we navigate in and out groups contributes to safety in a very powerful way. And being able to, hopefully, we spoke about in our ambassadors meeting the idea of having a container, right? And how to be able to expand your container so that we can navigate some of these difficult conversations, so that we can push forward, because not everybody has the bandwidth, like we spoke earlier, to be able to have the leadership skills to be able to move that. It's very difficult, it's very dry, and it's very slow. Yeah. And so being able to expand my journey as a leader so that I can be a better leader, and hopefully help my younger ambassadors so that they can grow into their best leadership self.
That's kind of tie into mine as well. You kind of gave me a little bit of inspiration earlier when you had said how you were prepping the ambassadors to have conversations. So every year we do a little thing about DEI for the Radicals, and then I'm the teacher, and I'm just like, wow, this would be so much better if there were other teachers. And so I think this next year, prepping that content for me to teach others to teach, and then basically be teaching the skills to empower those that do not look like us to be stepping up in those spaces if they desire to do so. So that's like a tangible I'll be trying to do for the coming off season. Thanks for that.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Look at us growing already. Come on, let's go. That's awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. I mean, this is what's all about, our continued commitment to these things, right, to these issues. It's not just about learning. It's not about just opening your brain. But now that you have that information, now that you have the skills, what are we going to do about it? So I really like hearing from all of you. I really see you guys. I see your perspectives. I appreciate you bringing all those perspectives to this conversation. We need all hands on deck if we're going to make change in this country and around the world. And it's super important that we model that you can come and have a conversation on difficult topics, kind of uneasy topic for different people for many valid reasons. But the first step is getting at the table, or the stools in this case, and talking about it, seeing different perspectives, and seeing what we can take away and bring back to our communities to evoke change. So thank you so much. Thank you, AUDL. This is Scarlen Martinez with Rise, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scarlen.